The smell of gasoline and old paint was the first thing that greeted me each morning, a harsh reminder of where I now slept. "You're just too slow for this house, Mom," my son Tyler had said, his voice laced with an impatient pity that was sharper than any knife. His wife, Nancy, had stood beside him nodding, her face a mask of serene agreement. "The stairs are a hazard for you," she'd added, her tone suggesting this was an act of profound kindness. And so they moved my bed, my life, into the cold concrete garage of the Cincinnati home I had shared with my husband for 40 years. They put me out there with the lawnmower and the dusty Christmas decorations, like a piece of old furniture that was no longer fit for display. They thought my grief over losing Frank had made me weak, my silence a sign of senility. They thought I would just fade away amidst the oil stains and the cobwebs. They didn't know that every cold night I spent in that garage, I wasn't just getting colder, I was getting harder. They thought they had put me in my place. They were about to find out that my place was at the head of a boardroom table, signing the papers that would demolish their comfortable stolen world. It all started, as these slow-motion tragedies so often do, with an act of love born from a place of profound loss. When my husband Frank passed away, the silence in our sprawling Cincinnati ranch house became a living entity. It was a constant, heavy companion that followed me from room to room, a suffocating blanket of grief. I was adrift in an ocean of loneliness, and the echoes of my life with him were a constant, painful reminder of everything I had lost. Tyler and Nancy, married for just over 2 years, were living in a cramped, overpriced apartment near the Galleria, perpetually complaining about the rent, their student loans, the general injustice of their starter life. My mother's heart, still foolishly programmed to nurture and to fix, saw a solution that I believed would save us all. I would have company, the sound of life to fill the dreadful quiet. They would have a beautiful, spacious home, rent-free, a chance to get on their feet. I remember the day I offered it to them, my voice full of a hope that now tastes like ashes in my mouth. We were on the back porch, the one Frank and I had screened in ourselves, sipping iced tea against the humid Cincinnati heat. "Why don't you two move in with me?" I'd said. "There's so much space here, it's too much for one old woman. You could save money." Nancy's eyes, a cool pale shade of green, had lit up with a speed that should have been a warning. "Oh, Margaret," she'd cooed, her voice a perfect performance of sweet reluctance. "We couldn't possibly impose on you like that. It's far too generous." Tyler, my son, my only child, had played his part with devastating skill. He'd wrapped an arm around my shoulder, a gesture that felt like a comfort then, but feels like a cage in retrospect. "Mom, are you sure? We don't want to be a burden." I had waved their protests away, so desperate to feel needed again, to fill the echoing silence of my life. "Nonsense," I'd said, my heart swelling with a misguided sense of purpose. "This house needs a family. It needs you." And so they came, with their moving boxes and their hollow smiles and their empty promises. "We'll take such good care of you, Mom," Tyler had sworn, kissing my cheek. I believed him. I wanted to believe him more than I had ever wanted anything. I thought I was inviting my family home to heal together. I didn't realize I was simply opening the door to a pair of smiling invaders who saw my grief as an opportunity and my love as a resource to be plundered. The occupation of my home began not with a single battle, but with 1,000 small, quiet surrenders. The first thing to go was the wallpaper in the dining room. It was a soft, floral print that Frank and I had picked out together on a rare weekend away, a symbol of our shared life. I came home from a trip to Walmart one afternoon to find Nancy peeling it off in long, satisfying strips, a look of intense concentration on her face. "What do you think, Margaret?" she'd asked, not waiting for an answer. "I'm thinking a nice, sophisticated gray. It will make the room feel so much bigger and more modern." I felt a lump form in my throat. "But Frank and I chose that paper together," I'd whispered, the words feeling small and powerless. "I know," she'd said with a bright, dismissive smile, "and it was lovely for its time. But tastes change. We need to update the space to reflect all of us. All of us." That became their justification, their mantra for the slow, systematic erasure of my life from the walls of my own home. Next came the furniture. The sturdy, comfortable armchair, where Frank had read the paper every morning, was replaced by a sleek, low-slung leather thing that looked like it belonged in a corporate office lobby. "The old one was just so worn out, Mom," Tyler had explained, his voice laced with a condescending pity. "This one is Italian leather. It's an investment in the property." My collection of family photos on the mantelpiece, Tyler's school pictures, our wedding portrait, a faded photo of my own parents on their wedding day, were gradually taken down. "We're just decluttering," Nancy would say, replacing them with a single large abstract canvas of angry-looking red streaks. "It creates a more sophisticated focal point." Every change felt like a small death, a quiet negation of my past. The injustice of it all began as a slow burn in my chest. This was my home, filled with the ghosts of my happiest memories, and they were exorcising them one by one, redecorating my life as if it were a fixer-upper they had bought on the cheap. Even the food, the very heart of my role as a mother and homemaker, became a front in their campaign. My Sunday meatloaf, a recipe Tyler had once begged for, was now deemed too heavy and full of preservatives. My pot of morning grits was met with a lecture from Nancy about empty calories. They embarked on a series of ever-changing expensive diets, filling the refrigerator with foods I didn't recognize and couldn't pronounce. The comforting smell of my home was replaced by the alien scent of steamed vegetables and simmering resentment. I was being made to feel like a relic in my own kitchen, my love and care dismissed as outdated and unhealthy. I found myself retreating more and more to my bedroom, the one space they had not yet conquered. I would sit on the edge of my bed, the bed I had shared with Frank for 4 decades, and listen to the sounds of my life being dismantled, the scrape of furniture being moved, the murmur of their voices planning the next update, the confident, happy laughter that never included me. I told myself I was being overly sensitive, that this was the price of not being alone, but the loneliness I felt then, surrounded by people who were actively erasing me, was 1,000 times more profound and painful than the quiet solitude I had known before. The subtle conquest of my home's decor was merely the prelude to a much more audacious and devastating campaign, the takeover of my finances. The maneuver was executed with the chilling precision of a corporate raid, all under the guise of loving familial concern. They staged the intervention one evening at the new, uncomfortable dining table they had insisted on buying. Tyler had a laptop open, and Nancy had a folder of my own bills spread out before her. "Mom," Tyler began, his voice a carefully calibrated instrument of solemnity, "we were just going through some of your paperwork, and honestly, we're a little worried. It seems like a lot for you to manage on your own." Nancy chimed in, her voice a soft, persuasive murmur. "We just want to make sure you're taken care of, Margaret. What if you missed a payment? The penalties can be so steep. We think it would be so much easier if we helped you organize everything." My defenses immediately went up. Frank and I had been diligent savers. He had worked 2 jobs for years to ensure that I would be left financially secure, independent. My savings, my pension, they were my last bastion of autonomy, the one part of my life that was still unequivocally mine. "I've been managing my own finances for over 40 years, Tyler," I said, my voice tight. "I know what I'm doing." "Of course you do, Mom," he soothed, his tone so placating it felt like an insult. "No one is questioning your ability. This is about family helping family. It's about letting us take some of the burden off your shoulders so you can relax." They were masters of this emotional blackmail. They framed their power grab as an act of love, of filial duty. To refuse would be to seem suspicious, paranoid, and ungrateful. It would mean starting a fight I was too weary to wage. And so, against every screaming instinct in my soul, I relented. The next day at the bank was a surreal out-of-body experience. Tyler, holding my elbow in a gesture of feigned support, did all the talking. He told the bank manager a beautifully crafted story about creating a consolidated family estate account to make things easier for his beloved mother. I signed the documents where he told me to, my signature feeling like a forgery of my own will. And just like that, the keys to my financial kingdom were in their hands. For the first few weeks, they maintained the illusion of responsibility. The utility bills were paid. But then the bank statements, which they started trying to intercept, began to reveal the truth. There were charges from high-end restaurants in downtown Cincinnati. There were online shopping sprees for designer clothes. There was a weekend trip to Seattle that I only learned about through a photo Nancy posted on social media. I found a statement they had carelessly left on the kitchen counter, and confronted Tyler, my hand shaking as I pointed to a charge for several $1,000s from an electronics store. A massive wall-sized television now dominated the living room. "What is this, Tyler?" I asked. "It's an upgrade, Mom," he said, not even looking away from the screen. "An investment in the property. It increases the resale value for all of us." The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. My life savings, the money Frank and I had scrimped and saved for our old age, was being used to invest in a house they were living in for free, and I was being told it was for my benefit. I was no longer a mother. I was a resource. I was the silent, involuntary backer of their increasingly extravagant lifestyle. The injustice of it was a constant, dull ache in my chest. I had given them my home, my trust, and now my financial security. I was funding my own marginalization, paying for the very chains that were binding me, and they had the audacity to call it family. With my home redecorated to their tastes and my finances under their control, Nancy began the final phase of her campaign, my complete and utter isolation. She seemed to operate with the cold, calculating precision of a general, identifying and neutralizing every potential source of outside support I had. My friends, the women who had been my lifeline since Frank's death, were the first to be cut off. My weekly mahjong game with my best friend Monica, and 2 other ladies, was a sacred ritual. It was a few hours of laughter, shared stories, and a blessed respite from the escalating tension in my own home. "Mom," Nancy announced one Tuesday, her tone bright and non-negotiable, "Tyler and I have decided to start hosting a weekly dinner party for some of his work contacts. We'll be using the dining room on Wednesday nights, so you'll have to find another time for your little game." I was floored. "But Nancy, we've played on Wednesdays for almost 20 years, I protested weakly. "Well, times change," she replied with a dismissive shrug. "This is important for Tyler's career." It was a lie, of course. The dinner party happened exactly once, but its purpose was served. My mahjong game, my small circle of joy, was effectively disbanded. I was forced to make a series of humiliating phone calls to my friends, offering flimsy excuses that I knew they didn't believe. Monica, my dearest and most stubborn friend, was not so easily dissuaded. She knew something was deeply wrong. She kept calling, trying to make plans, but Nancy always had a new, more elaborate excuse ready. I would listen from my bedroom, a helpless prisoner, as Nancy's voice, a masterpiece of feigned concern, wove a tapestry of my supposed decline. "Oh, Monica, I'm so sorry. Margaret is just not up to having visitors today. She's been so frail and tired." Or even more cruelly, "Her memory has been a little off lately. The doctor says it's best to keep her environment calm and not to overstimulate her." It was a diabolically brilliant strategy. She was not only cutting me off from my support system, but also actively constructing a narrative of my incompetence. She was discrediting me in advance, ensuring that if I ever did manage to cry for help, I would be dismissed as a confused, senile old woman. The world outside my front door became a distant, unattainable land. They had sold my car, claiming it was unsafe for me to drive, leaving me completely dependent on them for transportation, a service they rarely, if ever, provided. A trip to the Target for my own toiletries became a complex negotiation that usually ended with, "We'll try to get to it this weekend, Margaret." My world shrank until it was contained within the 4 walls of the house, and within those walls I was an inmate. The loneliness was no longer a dull ache, it was a sharp, stabbing pain. It was the excruciating loneliness of being erased while still breathing. They no longer bothered with the pretense of including me in their lives. They would talk over me, around me, about me, as if I were a piece of furniture that happened to be breathing. Their cruelty became casual, a part of the daily routine. Tyler would helpfully explain the plot of a television show to me, as if I were a child. Nancy would organize my bookshelf, donating books she deemed too old-fashioned. I was being infantilized and erased, my identity worn away by the constant daily friction of their disrespect. I was a ghost in my own home, haunting the memories of a life they were systematically bulldozing to make way for their own opulent, empty future. The moment that would come to define my exile, the act of such profound and bizarre cruelty that it finally shattered my stupor, was their decision to move my bed into the garage. It was presented not as an act of banishment, but as an act of profound care. They sat me down one afternoon, their faces a perfect blend of solemnity and compassion. "Mom," Tyler began, his voice soft and low, "we've been worried about you with the stairs. Your arthritis has been acting up, and we're scared you're going to fall." Nancy nodded, her expression one of deep, furrowed concern. "We just don't think it's safe for you to be sleeping upstairs anymore," she said. "We want you to be on the main level, where we can keep a better eye on you." I was immediately suspicious. "There are no bedrooms on the main level," I pointed out. "There's the guest room," Tyler said, conveniently forgetting that they had converted the downstairs guest room into his personal home gym several months prior. "We were thinking," Nancy said, her voice dropping to a gentle, persuasive whisper, "that we could set up a nice cozy space for you in the garage. We could clean it out, put down a rug. It has its own entrance. It would be like your own little private apartment." The garage. They wanted to move me into the garage, the cold concrete box where Frank used to store his tools and I kept the Christmas decorations, the place that smelled of gasoline and dust and forgotten things. They were suggesting I sleep there, next to the lawnmower and the spare tires. "No," I said, the word coming out as a choked whisper. "Absolutely not. That's not a bedroom." Tyler's face hardened, the mask of concern slipping to reveal the cold impatience beneath. That's when he said it. "Mom, you're just too slow for this house now," he said, his voice flat and final. "The stairs are a problem. Your things are a problem. This is the best solution. It's safer for you." I looked at my son, the boy whose hand I had held as he took his first steps, and I saw a stranger. I saw a man who was willing to put his own mother in a garage so he wouldn't be inconvenienced by her age, by her grief, by her very existence. The argument was short and brutal. I had no leverage, no power. They had my money. They had isolated me from my friends. They were in complete control. "We're doing this for your own good, Margaret," Nancy said, her voice taking on a sharp, non-negotiable edge. And so they did. That weekend, while I sat in the living room, a silent, impotent observer, they dismantled my life. They moved my bed, the bed I had shared with my husband for 40 years, the bed he had died in, and set it up in the corner of the cold, drafty garage. They put down a cheap, thin rug over the oil stains on the concrete floor. They moved my dresser next to a stack of old tires. They called it my new suite. I spent my first night in the garage listening to the hum of the old freezer and the sound of mice scratching in the walls. The air was cold and smelled of dampness and decay. I lay in my own bed, a refugee in my own home, and I did not cry. The tears were gone, burned away by a white-hot fury that was beginning to take shape in the darkness. They had not just moved my bed, they had drawn a line. They had declared in the clearest possible terms that I was no longer part of the family that lived inside the house. I was something other, something to be stored away, something that belonged in the garage with the other broken, unused things. They thought they had finally put me in my place. They had no idea that they had just put me in the perfect position to plan my revenge. Life in the garage was a daily exercise in humiliation and a masterclass in survival. I was an exile in my own home, a political prisoner banished to the cold, concrete netherworld. My suite was a corner of the garage, sectioned off by a flimsy curtain they had hung from the rafters. My bed, my dresser, and a single armchair sat on a threadbare rug, surrounded by the ghosts of our family's past, boxes of old toys, Frank's dusty fishing gear, stacks of forgotten holiday decorations. The smell of gasoline and mildew was my constant companion. Every morning I would wake to the sound of Tyler starting his car, the rumble of the engine vibrating through the concrete floor, the exhaust fumes seeping under my curtain. It was a visceral, daily reminder of my demotion. To get to the bathroom or the kitchen, I had to walk through the house, a trespasser on my own property. Nancy and Tyler would watch me, their eyes following my slow, careful steps, with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Be careful on the steps, Margaret," Nancy would call out, her voice dripping with a false concern that was more insulting than silence. I became a creature of the shadows, timing my movements to coincide with when they were out of the house. I would creep into the kitchen to make myself a small meal, always cleaning up meticulously, leaving no trace of my presence. I was a ghost, who still had to eat. The cold was a constant ache in my bones. The garage was unheated, and the thin rug did little to insulate from the damp chill of the concrete. I would sleep in my clothes, huddled under a pile of blankets, my breath fogging in the air. But as my body grew colder, my mind grew sharper. The rage that had been ignited on that first night in the garage did not burn out. It banked, smoldering into a cold, hard, diamond-bright resolve. My banishment gave me something I hadn't had inside the house: privacy. They left me alone out there. They thought I was defeated, a sad old woman talking to herself amidst the dust and the spiders. They had no idea I was planning a war. I had a secret weapon they had forgotten about, an old forgotten landline in the garage that Frank had installed for his workshop. It still worked. and with it, I reconnected with the outside world. My first call was to my best friend Monica. I hadn't spoken to her in months, thanks to Nancy's campaign of isolation. When she heard my voice, a weak, trembling whisper coming from the cold, she burst into tears of anger and relief. "I knew it," she sobbed. "I knew they were doing something to you. Where are you, Margaret? Tell me everything." I did. I told her about the stolen money, the isolation, and the final unthinkable humiliation of being moved into the garage. Monica, a retired paralegal with a mind like a steel trap, listened in horrified silence. When I was done, her voice was low and deadly. "That ungrateful, monstrous child," she said, "and that venomous wife of his. Margaret, we are going to burn their little kingdom to the ground." Her fire fueled my own. She became my general, my co-conspirator. She helped me find a lawyer, a woman named Miss Albright, who specialized in elder law and had a reputation for being a shark. Our first meeting was a clandestine affair, held in Monica's car in a grocery store parking lot. I laid out my story, my voice stronger now, fueled by righteousness. The key to our entire strategy, the fact that would be their undoing, was simple: the deed to the house. It was in my name, and mine alone. Legally, they were nothing more than tenants, squatters in a kingdom they thought they had conquered. They had put me in the garage. They were about to find out I owned the whole damn property, and the eviction notice was already being drafted.